Tracy Emerick, a retired marketing expert with a PhD in business administration, draws on his extensive background in business, leadership, and coaching to bring us this insightful exploration. Through this 80-page volume, Emerick reveals the profound parallels between the coaching philosophies of Bill Belichick, one of football's most legendary figures, and the timeless leadership teachings of Jesus Christ. Stay with us as we dive into how these two figures on the field and in faith have shaped our understanding of mentorship, decision-making, and personal growth.
There we go.
There we go. Hey, nice to see you.
I'll be darned.
Yay.
Amazing when
Exactly.
you turn the technology on, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it works. That's even better. So that's kind of good. Hold on, let me just adjust this a bit more. I'm going to be adjusting, obviously getting rid of the green later on.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about that though. You're okay. Hold on. There's too much going on. Okay. Well, let's make a start, shall we? If you're all right.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So I'll add the intro. I don't know if you've done one of these before, have you?
Say again?
Have you done one of these before with the
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right, fine. So I'll do the intro and outro later. Don't worry, I won't bore you with that.
Okay. All right.
So, let's have a look. So, all right. So let's just start off. I've got my notes here that I've made. So it sounds great, and there's a whole bunch of questions that I can ask you. So let's start with the first one. Tracy, it's lovely to meet you. Thanks for taking the time out to actually come along and talk about your book. It's fascinating stuff. I really want to find out some more about it, and I know that our listeners will also want to know as well. So, I mean, it's quite interesting here. I've made some extensive notes because of the amount of interest I had in it. Now, obviously, you've got two seemingly unrelated subjects, which is kind of interesting, right? So you've got Bill Belichick, okay, and Jesus Christ, okay. So really, you're talking about them being effective coaches, and even though they seem unrelated, what inspired you to write a book like that about coaching and about Jesus Christ and about Bill? How does that work?
Well, actually, this is one of four books, but this one is about the coaching aspect. But what I tried to do is I tried to combine known individuals with Jesus to make Jesus a man, because most of the positioning people have for Jesus is they get all carried away. He's God, and we can't talk to him, and he's out there somewhere. Everybody gets nervous about it. So what I try to do in all my books, because they're all and Jesus Christ something, is to personify Jesus and explain him as an individual. But I had to juxtapose it with a human, because I believe that we all have God within us. And so part of this is to say part of the humanness and the capabilities of Bill Belichick are God-given. And so I'm trying to reposition Jesus as a man and help, or at least try to get people to ask questions about their own talents and skills. So that's the juxtaposition. And some people have read it and they enjoy it, and some people read it and they don't get it. So it's like, well, if I can get 50-50, that's not bad.
That's a good ratio, actually, isn't it? 50-50. Okay, so for some of us, we don't know who Bill Belichick is. So sorry. So explain who Bill is very quickly.
Bill Belichick is a winning American football coach. I happened to live in New England, and he was the coach of the New England Patriots for many years, won many Super Bowls, coached many players to success. Currently, one of his successful players, Vrabel, is going to be the new coach of the Patriots because Bill Belichick is moving on to do college football now. But he's quite well known nationally. You either love him or hate him. People from other towns, other regions of the country don't like him because he's such a winning coach, but people from New England love him because he's such a winning coach.
Of course, right.
But he's also the paradigm of a coach, because whenever he was interviewed, he'd go on television and he'd have a sweatshirt kind of hanging off, and he answered questions very abruptly, uh, not seemingly very social. I mean, he was kind of a dud as far
Okay.
as personality goes, but the team loved him, and the people he coached love him. So he was the perfect coach. He didn't pound his own chest. If he had a bad game, he said, I did some poor coaching there. I'll have to do better next time. He never blamed a bad game on his players. It was always he and his coaching team that didn't do their job correctly. So I mean, that's what a coach is. He took the heat, and when it was time to win, he gave them the glory. He
Yeah.
was not a glory hound. You never saw him outside of the football, environment. So he wasn't a camera hound, and so he did his job, and that's what he told his players to do: do your job. And so in this book, I talk about coaching as a relationship between, I mean, a coach is basically a manager. And what you're doing in coaching is you're succeeding through the efforts of others. So what you have to be able to do is to coach and counsel them to success so that you have some success. And the good coaches know that, the good managers know that. I mean, it's no different that, and the good parents know that. If you're going to have successful kids, you have to coach and counsel them to be successful kids. And if you're going to have an organization that's successful, you're going to have to, if you're in charge, if you're the manager, then you have to coach and counsel other people, and let them fail. I mean, you have to let them get their hands on whatever it is and do it, and then help them succeed if they don't do it to the best they can. And I think
Which is
that's the talent of a coach.
absolutely, and as you say, a talent of a manager as well, because the temptation is to micromanage, right? So it sounds like Bill was, the sort of guy who would let people get on with it, like you say, issue instructions. This is what you need to do, and there we are.
And I think the hardest part, it was for me when I had my company, is not to take the job back.
Yeah.
If I'm coaching and counseling somebody and you see they're heading for the wall, then they're going to smash. You're tempted to say, "Here, let me take this over for you because you're going to blow it." But that
Yeah.
doesn't help. All it does is
No.
give you more to do, and they get to go home early.
Yeah, that's I like it, Tracy. That's very good. Yeah. So, and plus also don't forget that that's one person. So if you've got two people doing that and then three people doing that,
Yeah.
well, that just snowballs into horrific kind of times. So let me
Yes.
look at my notes again and ask you, okay, so you explore the idea of mentorship as we've sort of just been discussing there. So can you tell us more about how the principles of mentorship really from Belichick, as you say, and Jesus apply to everyday life beyond sports? I mean, how does that work? How would Jesus be seen in that sort of aspect?
Well, I think Jesus' life with his disciples was the mentor. He showed them what a good individual was about. He was a good guy. Uh, he started with 12, ended up with 11, and that 11 went on to propagate. Now we have about 1.2 billion Christians in the world. So he must have done something right. And a lot of it was his example, because there's a lot of stories, and probably one of the most popular ones is when the disciples were trying to keep the children away, and he said, "No, let the children come to me." So, and in that day and age, kids were nothing. I mean, get them out of here.
Yeah,
And basically the same way with a lot of women. But he was embracing of all children, people, his tribe, other tribes. He didn't discriminate in any way. And a lot of his stories were about Sumerians and people who were not Jewish. So he gave examples. He did a lot of sermon, a lot of teaching, and then he would tell the disciples, "Well, I'm going to teach this, but then I'm going to give you the inside goodies later." And so then he would coach and counsel them about it. And he sent them out on trial runs of how to go out and be among the people. Take nothing with you. Just go out and be with the people. And if they accept you, fine. And if they don't, go find another village. So he coached and counseled, but he also was the model of how they should act. So I think that was his mentoring style was obviously very, very personal and very interpersonal, because he didn't care about things and stuff. I mean, it didn't make any difference to him. The only thing that he cared about were people.
And that's the best way to try and move your own story forward, isn't it? Really,
Yes, it is.
to get people to, well, that's where we get the saying, isn't it, about evangelizing?
Yes,
Obviously, yeah. So him putting forward his stories, helping his disciples to push forward without fear of failure. I think that's the whole thing here, isn't it?
right, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I'm sure
Okay,
they did from time to time.
bound to have happened, bound to
Right.
have happened. I can imagine, especially with Bill as well, as you mentioned earlier on. He
Yep.
moved forward from failures, and his team moved forward from failures. So I can see the juxtaposition there, and I can see how that works. Fantastic. Okay. So you also mentioned the importance of decision making in, well, football and life. Okay. So what key strategies do you believe we can take from these two figures to make better decisions in our lives? How does Bill, how does Jesus show us how to make good decisions?
Well, I think their example is studying them to see how they made decisions. I think is the key. I don't know if there's a formula.
Mm.
I think the formula of good decision making is understand what decisions to make and how to implement those decisions. That instead of winging it, which we
Yeah,
have a tendency to do. And I guess that's a U.S. term, winging it. I'm not sure,
we're
but
okay with that here. Yeah.
okay. But I think their example of their style uh, is part of the mentoring and part of the teaching and part of the supporting. Uh, if you're developed that way, it's almost becomes instincts to help others develop that way because you know what got you to, we'll call it greatness or success. And so if you've internalized that, it's a hell of a lot easier to help somebody else be successful using those same tools, whatever those tools were. And part of that style, Belichick's style was very abrupt to the public, but I got a feeling it was very personal to those individual players.
It must have been, mustn't it, in order to get the best out of them.
Yes.
Um, Being a tyrant doesn't always work, does it? I mean, it works
No.
sometimes, but not
No,
for
no,
long.
you can only flog the donkey so long, and it's going to lay down. So that doesn't work.
No, exactly.
The
So
carrots
it
work.
sounds, say again, sorry.
I say carrots work for donkeys, but not flogging.
Yeah, no, exactly. So more carrots, that's what they need.
Yep.
So I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? So basically what you're saying is it's about decision making and figuring out, well, the first question is, what have you got to decide? I think we all get lost in this fog, don't we? Of
Yes.
trying to go, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? And do I do that? So in your book, how do you think strategies for coping with not really knowing what your path is, how does that sort of come across in the book?
Well, I think it was how each of them related to their players, and they changed their strategy. I mean, clearly Jesus wanted to get the word spread. I mean that's where he was coaching and counseling his disciples. Belichick wants to win games, and he's not ashamed of saying that. So with
Right.
those two strategies in mind, if Bill Belichick is coaching and counseling, it's helping somebody to be a better deliverer of whatever they do in order to win games. And if they're not performing up to their abilities, he has a tendency to motivate them a little bit more. And I'm sure, well, we know that the disciples failed Jesus a lot. I mean, it seemed like every time he took a couple of them off, on a separate discussion, they'd fall asleep on him. So I mean, he had his challenges as well, just trying to keep the flock up and involved. But I think again we go back to style, and if your decision making is based on how do I help them be successful rather than how do I be successful, that's now you're coaching and counseling.
Yeah. I've often wondered how the disciples stayed together as a unit, kind of thing, and it obviously is because they were following Jesus.
Right,
But as we said, you don't follow somebody who's not, well, I guess charismatic, yeah, someone who doesn't care, someone who isn't looking out for you. Why would you follow that sort of person? Is what we said earlier on.
right.
Being a tyrant doesn't last. So that's good. Okay, thank you for that. All right. So, as someone, this is you with an extensive experience in background in business and leadership, how did your own experiences shape the way that you view coaching and mentorship? You mentioned your business earlier on. Is that how you've come across this or in the past?
Well, actually, I think if I look back at myself, I was probably a pretty bad coach
Oh,
because I was one of the ones that would help. I was in the creative business. I had a marketing agency, and I thought everybody was creative, but I learned that wasn't the case, especially clients. But that's a whole nother discussion.
yeah.
Uh, but my tendency was if somebody was going off the rails, so to speak, in a client meeting or in a presentation, my tendency was to prop them up rather than let them fail. And part of that was my own ego because I didn't want my agency to look bad. So I wouldn't let them fail. So I look at myself and say, well, yeah, you weren't the best, because you would intercede and not let somebody skin their knees. But I don't know. I couldn't help myself. So I've coached and counseled myself now to say you can't do that anymore. You have to let people give it a try. And if they skin their knees, they skin their knees.
Well, that's easier said than done sometimes, isn't it? Especially when there's dollars on the line, right?
Well,
So,
you're absolutely correct. It,
yeah. So, yeah,
it becomes very real. If
it
you're
does.
if you're going to survive or fail, and you say, "Well, I'd rather survive."
Exactly. So the temptation to manage that situation. I think though sometimes the coachee, okay, so the person that you're coaching, sort of at certain stages gets to the point where they want that help, but will never ask for it. So I'm
Right,
sure you've been in lots of situations where perhaps one of your staff was giving a presentation and they kept looking at you, hoping that you would intercede.
yes,
And then there's, hope, hoping to hope that you would. And then sometimes you wouldn't, and then they do whatever comes naturally. And then
right.
when you do take over, they probably sat down so quickly. They were very, very happy that you were there, right?
Well, and there's the corollary of that too. And this I did later on in my career a lot of consulting with small and medium-sized businesses. And in those environments, the hardest part for managers and business owners in that arena is the people that got them to a certain level aren't necessarily the people that are going to get them to the next level. And so you have to say, look, so and so was great when there was three employees, but he or she is they're kind of maxed out. They're not going to grow with you. So you find something for them to do that they're very successful at, and you move on with other people. Some people just, they develop to a point, and that's kind of like their maximum velocity, and you can't coach them to be faster or better or whatever. And that's the hard part for entrepreneurs when they have people who are loyal when they were small, and then as they get bigger, they say, well, I appreciate your loyalty and blah blah, and here's what we're going to do. But you have to get other players on your team to advance your business.
Yeah. That's so tricky and so true as well. It really is, honestly. Wise words there. So, obviously, you're a PhD as well, then, Tracy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and
I thought I wanted to be a college professor, so I got my PhD in business, and I went and taught college for a while, and I found out, nah, I don't want to do that.
you don't like that then.
Well,
It's not.
there was an awful lot of politics inside
Yeah.
university life, and it's something when you're not in it, you don't know about it, but once you're in it, it's like, ah, man, I thought politics was out there. This is a whole nother game. And so I decided, no, if I can fail on my own, so I'll go out on my and stay on my own, and not go into the academic life. I have to say, I thought it was going to be Nirvana, but
Yeah.
when I got there, I found out, nah, not my thing.
No,
So
well, it's funny. Yeah, I think there are very few hybrid people, right? So people who can work in industry and then can move over to academia. I don't think there's many of those. So
no,
I hope you don't feel bad about that decision because you
not at
shouldn't do.
all, not at
Oh,
all.
good. That's all right then. So what was your thesis in your dissertation? What did you look at?
Uh, Customer contact, frequency of customer contact, and one theory is you've got to stay in touch with your customers all the time. The other theory is you're driving your customers crazy.
Mhm.
So I went out to customers and I said, how frequently would you like, if you're a key account for some, it could be a commodity, it could be computers, it could be anything. If you're a key account, how often do you like contact from your vendor? And it was quite interesting because the results of my research is I had bimodal distribution. Half of the people liked frequent contact and half the people didn't like frequent contact. So I had
Great.
two curves juxtaposed on opposite ends of the scale. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I would have been so much happier had there been one big curve that said infrequent or
Exactly.
frequent, but no
Mm.
such luck. It was a jump ball, and you know, you have to figure it out one-on-one with your clients because some
Mm.
clients don't like frequent contact because it's annoying to them, but others like it because it makes them feel good. So
Right.
you
No,
play that one by ear, so to speak.
well, that's your conclusion then, isn't it? Really, at the end of the
It,
day,
it,
that's what you've got to do.
unfortunately, my conclusion is there's no conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's quite interesting. I like that. I bet your supervisor was very happy about that.
No,
Okay. No, exactly. Okay, well, that's brilliant. So I love that story. I think that's fantastic. All right. So let's have a look. So the dog's having a little scratch here. This is
no
the
problem.
beauty of working from home nowadays, isn't it? You finished, Barney?
That's right.
Have you finished? You all right? Yeah, good. That's all right then. Sorry about that. We'll probably keep that in. Seems quite funny, actually.
No problem.
Okay. So let's have a look then. So another question I've got for you is that you compare Belichick's emphasis on team dynamics with Jesus's teachings on community. So can you expand on how collaboration and teamwork are essential in both coaching and spiritual leadership?
Well, I think the goal of a good coach or counselor is to develop camaraderie, that there's mutual support and respect. Because, well, I'm sure in professional sports, you're dealing with a lot of very talented people with very strong egos. And Belichick always was for the team. You do your job, but we're a team. And, the good players always gave credit to the team when they were interviewed one-on-one. And Jesus knew he wasn't going to be around. So he had to develop his 11 as a support team for each other because once he was gone, there was no act two, or there was no next game. I mean, he only had one shot at this game. So he had to develop those 11 to support each other. And then ultimately they went out and each one of them kind of did their own thing. But he needed them for their own mental health, so to speak, to have each other because he knew what the end game was for him.
Yeah, so they identify as a family unit, basically. As a
Correct.
team it can be a family. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because otherwise the stresses of, I guess, sports and the stresses of spreading the word could overwhelm an individual. So unless you have that backup of team and a good coach,
Right.
yeah, I can see where you're coming from. So it would be very difficult to do. It'd be too insular, and you wouldn't really be able to perform to the best of your ability. As I mean, if you're on the football field and you're throwing the ball, if there's no one there to catch it, that's that for the team, isn't
Yeah.
it? Right? So
That didn't get you
you're
anywhere.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and I can see that as well with the disciples going out there, being rebuffed, as you said. If they miss out in one village, go to the next village. How many villages do you have to go to, right, in order to
Right.
get a good reception? And we forget how new all that was back then. That
Well,
the stories, everything was completely new, wasn't it?
and how revolutionary.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
he basically taught and said, love your neighbor as yourself. And that was like, are you kidding me? I'm supposed to love these Romans? No way, you know. And so, but that was his message. And so when they started carrying that message out into the population, you know, those people were saying no way. So they had to have that team support to say, well, Jesus told us this was going to happen, but we're going to keep at it. Thankfully, they did.
Yeah, yeah. And coming together as a community to worship and things like that, I
Yeah.
guess helped that to build, didn't it? So, we're not
And subsequently they had struggles and fights, and the family fought with itself. History repeats itself in that sense. The
that's very
best
true.
intentions.
That's very true. That's very fascinating stuff, honestly. So, your book delves into the idea of making calculated choices. Yeah. So, can
Right.
you share an example of, say, a calculated choice you've made in your own life, where I guess careful decision making, led to a positive outcome?
Well, I think one of the decisions that I made was being self-employed. Because at one point in my career, I went to work for one of my clients for about a year, and it was awful.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I was much better as a consultant than an employee. And so I guess I would have to say I didn't make the decision properly. And I thought, well, maybe it'd be nice not to have to run so fast and, go to the same place all the time and not travel so much. But as it turned out, nah, wrong decision. Uh, I'm an independent individual and trying to help other people. But once you're an employee, then I'm not the coach anymore. I mean, I could coach my departments, but the owner is the coach, and it's really his attitudes and stuff that you have to respond to or not. So I found being employed was a bad decision for me as an individual.
So you looked at that and you thought you were a powerful person as in helping that business when you were the consultant and
You're right.
giving your advice and you were able to put that in forward. But yeah, the dynamic changes, doesn't it? And I think
Yes,
that's the point. It's
it
all of a
does.
sudden, yeah, all of a sudden you may be having a cup of coffee and a joke with your client. The next minute you're doing that, but you're thinking, hang on a second, this guy's my boss, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
I can
right.
imagine. I can
Yeah,
imagine. So okay, so you decided and you made a calculated decision to get out of there so that you could actually do and concentrate on what you need to,
right.
which is quite right to do, I think. And in the book, actually, you mentioned the significance of understanding your team, which is what you kind of just said about motivating your own team within that business. All right.
Right.
So how can this be applied to personal relationships? This is the point, isn't it? And not just professional settings. How does one understand one's partner? and move forward like that. I mean, do you think that there's coaching and counseling and all that sort of stuff within a relationship?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I think your spouse is one of your best coaches. I mean, you're each other's best coach uh, for two reasons. One, you generally get good coaching, and it's you're in your best interest to listen. So,
Yeah.
but you push back. I mean, the relationship isn't always perfect, but in a family unit, in a spouse relationship, uh, you have to have the give and take of interpersonal relations. I mean, if I told my wife what to do all the time, I'd be sleeping on the couch. Uh,
If you'd be sleeping with the dog outside, I think.
exactly. But if she over instructed me, then I would be pushing back. So part of that is the dynamics of the relationship, but you're always coaching and counseling each other, even in the small details. Like for me, my wife said, that shirt doesn't go with that sweater. That was a subtle hint. Go change your sweater or change your shirt. You know? And so if I didn't do it, I'd hear about it again. But
Yeah.
that's the subtle coaching and counseling of the relationship.
Which we all need, right? So we
Yes.
can't. But what is the phrase? It's actually it sounds a bit old-fashioned now, I guess. But no man is an island. We
Yep.
have to all exist and coexist and just interact and everything else. And it sounds like, people who are your readers who are going to be reading your book, that's the sort of message that they can get from that, isn't it?
Right.
About coaching and being a team. Sorry, go on.
And one of the other points I make is that if you want to change the way you're being treated, then you have to change.
Mm,
Because people say, I don't like the way he or she treats me. It means you've got to change the way you interact with them. Because you're not going to change them to treat you any different. You're going to have to figure out, what do I got to do in order to have a better relationship with whoever that is.
that's a
So
good
you
point.
can't fix somebody else. You can only fix yourself in a
Yeah,
relationship.
actually, yeah, that's really wise again, because at the end of the day, if you interact with somebody and they treat you in a particular way, and then you change the method of your interaction, then of course they will have no choice but to treat you in a different way, wouldn't they?
Right,
And so, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess it's taking agency and taking control of your own situation in that respect,
right.
which is interesting.
And part of
Mm.
that's having the flexibility of being a coach, coaching yourself. And you say,
Well,
this individual likes flip answers. This individual likes, jokes. This individual doesn't like jokes, doesn't like joking around. So that's when you start managing yourself and your behaviors in order to get along with whoever that individual is
absolutely. So you changing your management style, right?
for yourself.
Um,
Yes.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you for that one then. That's pretty good. So, and let's talk about you as an author. All right. What challenges did you face when trying to balance the sports focused elements of your book with the spiritual and philosophical elements? Because obviously, they're not natural bedfellows, are they? So,
No.
how did you do that? How did you draw those parallels?
Well, the first one was Steve Jobs and Jesus Christ, called
Right.
Extreme Entrepreneurs. And that one kind of kicked the series off because once my publisher saw that book, he said, well, do you have any others? And I said, well, yeah. And so I rattled off some other titles and, suggested titles. And so we settled on three other titles and then it start cranking them out. I mean, the difference was the first book I did it on my own, with friends and family reading sections and stuff. The other books I did with professional editors. It
Right.
makes a big difference. I can tell you that, when you're on your own, all you can do is stare in the mirror or look at a blank piece of paper or screen, and try to come up with a different thought, a different point of view. But once you start working with professional editors, it's a whole easier world because you know what you want to say and you can explain as best you can. The editor says, well, yeah, but I think if you do blah, 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 you might get to your point quicker. It's like, huh, you must be a professional editor. And so the other three books were a lot easier than the first one.
Yeah.
But it is work. It's not, and the hardest part is the rewrite.
Right.
Once you think you got it all down, and the editor says, well, this chapter is really sick. Let's start over. And you go, oh, no, no, not over. So, you
I
know,
can imagine.
it, it's it's not easy. So, I mean, I wouldn't say no big deal. Yeah, it just pops out. But sometimes things that pop out don't make sense. And so that's why I really recommend, even if you hire a freelance editor, if you're going to get into the book writing business, get somebody that can help you with all kinds of stuff that editors do. I mean, I think I talk a little bit sometimes, in Germanic, throw me down the stairs, my hat,
Right.
and to me that makes sense. But if you write that down, anybody else reading that says, what in the world is he talking about?
That's very true.
So
That's very true.
that's where the editors come in.
Yeah. Well, you need a professional, don't you? Because think about it, if you get on a bus, you don't want one of the passengers driving, right? So you want a
Right.
professional that knows the route or the routes, whatever you pronounce it,
Yep.
and knows how to handle the vehicle. So no, that's wise words again there. Tracy, I'm learning a lot from you tonight, I've got to say. So,
Good.
okay, well, I think we need to start wrapping things up actually,
Okay.
but let's have what have I not asked you? What point do you think that everyone needs to hear that I haven't asked you? And I hope it'd be nice if you said, "Oh, nothing, Chris. You've dealt with everything." But I'm sure there is something. So please go
Well,
ahead.
well, I guess the one message that I'd like to say is these books are not instruction manuals. These are intended to be question generating manuals. As you read them and as you relate to the different thoughts or parts of each chapter, it's I want you to question, where do I fit in the scheme of things? Where does God fit in my scheme of things? Or what has God done for me? Or what can I do for God? Or what can I do for other people? So I want people to read these books and say, that was thoughtful, and I got a lot out of it that I can apply, or I could do more research or something. Yeah, it's not a how-to manual at all, because the last chapter of all four books is titled "So What." So, I kind of make fun of myself. After 7 or 8 chapters, I say, "So what?" You know, does it work for you or it doesn't work for you? You have to figure out your own path.
The so what? Yeah, that's like a feature and benefit kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
So no,
yep,
yeah, yeah. And what does that mean to me? So it
yep.
sounds like, yeah, sounds like your series of books are a wonderful read. And Tracy, it's been wonderful to meet you as well. I
Nice meeting
think that,
you.
I think we've had a great conversation, and I hope that all of the listeners are thinking the same thing. Now, yeah, basically, hopefully, I'll talk to you again when your next book comes out. What are you on the? Are you working on another one at the moment?
Well, no, I actually have the 4 done. They're all published. The one we're talking about is called Consummate Coaches, Bill Belichick and Jesus Christ. One is called Nifty Neighbor, which is Mr. Rogers and Jesus Christ.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the BrightWord Books Podcast. We hope today's conversation inspired you to reflect on leadership, mentorship, and the importance of thoughtful decision making in your own life. Be sure to check out Consummate Coaches, Bill Belichick and Jesus Christ by Tracy Emerick, available now on Amazon and other major bookstores. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this podcast with fellow book lovers. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing.